You're listening to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, episode number 60. So today I have a really interesting topic for you. And we are going to be talking about labels and how labels can often keep us feeling stuck. So we're going to dive into trauma bonds and twin flames and soulmates because I know a lot of people struggle with this, especially when we have a really strong connection to someone who hurt us. So stay tuned because you're not going to want to miss this. Welcome to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to help you heal after a toxic or narcissistic relationship. This podcast teaches you to use your subconscious mind to go from feeling stuck to set free. In here, you will learn how to use the power of your own mind to free yourself from emotional pain, move forward with confidence, and experience the inner peace you deserve in your healing journey after emotional abuse. I'm your host and subconscious reprogramming coach, Allison Dagny. So let's get started. So welcome back. Thanks for being here in another episode of the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. Today is episode 60, and I am so excited because I have so many listeners, so many downloads. I know you guys are sharing this with other people, and I appreciate you and I value you for spreading the word. So my mission is to help you navigate this journey of healing and recovery from emotional abuse. And today, I want to talk about how labels can keep us stuck. Labels can be really helpful too, right? Because it helps us understand ourselves better or the world around us. But sometimes labels can actually prevent us from healing. And I'm going to talk about that and the impact that that can have on your recovery after a toxic relationship. So, as you probably already know, labels really have a lot of power. And this can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? So we're going to talk about both. But the first thing I want to address is that when we label things, it helps us understand them more, right? So if we know what something is, then we can navigate it easier, right? So if we know that our ex, let's say, is a narcissist, it helps us understand the behavior. It helps us understand the psychology and how we need to behave or things that we should do, like gray rocking or not giving emotional reactions and things like that. So labels can be really helpful in some regards, but they can also keep us stuck. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because you need to be able to distinguish the difference of when a label is actually holding you back or allowing you to feel empowered. So they shape our perceptions of who we are. They shape our perceptions of the world around us. They shape our relationships. And so we have to be really careful and really discerning between how we're labeling things. Like, is this really what something is, and how is that changing my perception? How is that impacting my life? We need to really be introspective about this. And I think as we go through this, you're going to understand why. So, I always talk about the subconscious mind. I mean, that's literally what I do, is I work with the subconscious mind. I help you figure out what's in your subconscious mind, because that's driving 95% of the show. It's the thoughts that are in your subconscious mind that are creating the emotions, which then drive your behaviors. So the subconscious mind's role when we're talking about labels, in absorbing these labels into the subconscious mind, sometimes can perpetuate victim mentality. And we don't want to be stuck in victim mentality. We want to move to a victor mentality. We want to feel empowered, right? Because if not, then we're giving all of our power away to the people outside of us, to the people who have hurt us, right? And they already had that power. They already had all of the power, all of the control, right? So we want to take that back for ourselves. So sometimes when our subconscious mind is taking in these labels and assigning meaning and all this stuff, we end up feeling stuck. And so my goal is to help you move out of there so that you're not feeling stuck and that you can feel empowered again. So I'm sure you've heard these words. I'm sure you've heard the buzzwords of trauma bonds, twin flames, soulmates. You might even have other ones that you could add to the list. these things often come up in the context of toxic relationships. So we're talking about any sort of toxic dynamic. We're talking about abuse. We're talking about traumatic types of experiences, especially when we're dealing with a romantic partnership, right? Because we're talking twin flame soulmates and trauma bonds. So, there may be an element of this if it's not in a romantic relationship as well, but for the sake of this podcast, that's what we're going to be talking about. So these labels can sometimes hinder or stop our progress and prevent us from healing emotionally because we're so tied to the label. And let me explain how this works. So, for example, like trauma bonds in a toxic relationship are when one person has developed this bond to an abuser because the abuser has given them breadcrumbs, or the abuser has given them so much love and kindness and lies, basically. They've given them something to hold on to that is good, but then later come back and devalue that person, discard that person, and kind of keep them in this like addictive type of state where it's almost like you're addicted to a drug because you're receiving all these wonderful brain chemicals when this is happening, right? It's like that love stage where you're feeling the dopamine and the oxytocin and all these wonderful things, and then they yank it away. So what happens is this person becomes entrapped in this cycle of wanting that feeling back. It's just like somebody who's addicted to like a drug per se, where you're feeling really good in the moment and then you get into a period of withdrawal and then you just need that drug back. So it's the same sort of thing in a trauma bond. That's the best way I can describe that. So it's really difficult for people to get out of these types of situations because they crave that back. They want all of that goodness back. So you might be thinking, well, yeah, so that's actually a physical thing that's happening inside a person's body when they're in that bond, right? Just like a drug addiction, because those hormones, those chemicals that are released from your brain are so strong and they feel really good, right? So you want that back. So how can we just stop that? Well, like anything else that happens inside of your brain, it's habit-based, right? So these are habits that are continuing on a loop. And in order to change or break that trauma bond, we have to change the habit inside of your brain. But what happens is I've seen in a lot of people is that they hold on to this idea that they're trauma bonded, right? They all say like, well, I'm trauma bonded, right? There's nothing I can do. I'm trauma bonded. I have no way out. I literally have a physical like dependency on this person because of the chemicals in my brain. Like I literally can't detach. And that is where this internalization of what that means is actually perpetuating and holding you in that bond even more. So I want you to think about two different people, and if one person strongly believes that they're trauma bonded and another person refuses to believe that they're trauma bonded, right? The person who believes that they're trauma bonded, their emotions are going to then create behaviors, right? So let's say that the person believes they're being trauma bonded. They have all kinds of subconscious beliefs that say, I can't let go, and we're meant to be together, and it wasn't supposed to be like this, right? So all these are subconscious beliefs. These are just kind of typical ones that I hear. Those kinds of beliefs are then going to create emotions of longing, of sadness, of frustration, of guilt, or whatever those might be for that specific person. So then you have these emotions here. Well, those emotions are then driving the behavior. So then the behavior might be scrolling the person's social media, checking up on them, driving by their house, rumination, thinking about all the things that they should have done differently or that should have happened in a way that would make them still together or whatever that might be. So the subconscious beliefs create the emotions, not the other way around. A lot of people think emotions come first. They don't. Subconscious beliefs create the emotions. Then the emotions drive the behavior. So that's one perspective, right? So then we have another person, and the other person doesn't believe in trauma bonds. They maybe have never even heard of trauma bonds. They just believe that, and they know that there's a cycle. They know this person has hurt them, they've devalued them, they've discarded them, and then they come back with, roses and flowers and, kindness or whatever. And so they cognitively understand that this is a cycle, that this person just continues a behavior. But they're not assigning it a meaning of, oh, I'm trauma bonded. Oh, I'm stuck to this person. Oh, there's no way to get away. Like, they're looking at it from a totally different vantage point. So when that person believes that, no, I can get away from this person and this is just their pattern or behavior and I can change how I'm experiencing the world and it's not dependent on how this person is showing up, then their emotions are different. Their emotions may be more motivated, maybe more self-love, maybe aren't, beating themselves up all the time. And that emotion, those kinds of emotions, drive their behaviors. So they will not be doing the same things as the person who believes that they're trauma bonded. So I'm not trying to say in any way that trauma bonds aren't real, because I think I was in a trauma bond when I was with my abuser for 20 years. And, repetitively couldn't get out of that relationship because I was always being pulled back in. It was that cycle. However, I didn't know it was a trauma bond. I didn't even know that trauma bonds were a thing back then. I had no clue. So by the time that I was able to leave that relationship and the abuse, I found out later that that was a trauma bond. You can go back and listen to an episode that I have about trauma bonds kind of earlier in the podcast, where I have a guest on, Eve Bradley, and she talks about trauma bonds, and she's the one that brought that to my attention. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because you may not even know you're in a trauma bond. And if you don't if I knew I was in a trauma bond back then, I never would have gotten out. So it's really important to understand how your brain how you really in your subconscious assign meaning to the things and the words that you use. So trauma bonds are very complex, and especially when we're talking about toxic relationships, but, perceiving this label as your reality can and often does keep you trapped in this unhealthy dynamic where you continually are ruminating or continually are worrying or continually questioning or doubting yourself. So it definitely can be difficult to break free from a trauma bond, but it's even more difficult when you believe that you are stuck in the trauma bond, right? So it's about shifting the mentality that a trauma bond doesn't actually mean that you are stuck. A trauma bond, even the word bond, right? Because we're using these words, even the word bond has a lot of meaning. It's like you're glued to this person. So it's changing the way that we talk about things and inspecting the words that we use and how we use them, right? Because, if you say I am, and then you say trauma bonded, that's your reality. Your brain believes whatever you tell it. So if your brain is believing that, it's going to continue to perpetuate that. It wants to be right. So it's going to keep you feeling the same way continually. So I had a client who had come to me who was experiencing this trauma bond, and she was really, really upset because she knew cognitively that this person was bad for her. She knew she didn't want to be with this person. She knew, she was even in the middle of court battles and things with this person. And it was still hard for her because she kept wanting to peek at his social media. She kept wanting to figure out what was going on in his life and look at his new girlfriend and all the things that were kind of keeping her still attached to this person. And so what we did together was we uncovered the thoughts in her subconscious mind that were coming up, that were creating that behavior, right? Because her thoughts were holding her in this state of emotion that was driving a behavior to have her continually worrying and continually thinking about what was going on with her ex. But the thing was, it wasn't anything about her ex. It wasn't that she wanted to be with him. It wasn't that she wanted anything to do with him. The things that kept coming up in her subconscious mind, and this will be different for everyone, was that people will not know the real him, that people will believe that he's a good person, that people will not see the evil, that people will not know who he is, right? And so she was having a lot of fear come up because she believed in her subconscious mind that other people needed to know the truth about him and that other people should see him for what he truly was or truly is. But we worked through that because obviously we know we can't change other people's perceptions. We can't make people believe or think anything except for what they already believe and think. Yeah, can we show up with influence? Of course. But this thought pattern in her mind, in her subconscious, what was driving her behavior, because she kept wanting to go back and look to see if he had changed, to see if there was some sort of evidence that maybe she was wrong about him. And what we did was we took all of those subconscious beliefs, we run them through the 4-step process that I teach all my clients, and she practiced this for days and weeks. And then one day she came onto my call and she said, I haven't been checking, I haven't been looking, it hasn't been affecting me anymore. And that's the amazing part of rewiring your subconscious mind. Okay, so let's jump over to this notion of twin flames and soulmates. Now, if you believe in twin flames, if you believe in soulmates, I'm not here to challenge your beliefs, right? I'm just here to give you information to help you start to think about things in a little bit different way, right? So twin flames and soulmates are these ideas that people have, like soul bonds or like karmic journeys with other human beings that are on this planet. And maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. I have no idea, right? I can have my own opinions on that, and so can you. But sometimes holding these strong beliefs about twin flames and soulmates can have a negative impact on you personally, especially if it's tying you to a toxic relationship. Oh, well, we're meant to be, or oh, we're twin flames, or oh, we're soulmates. And so what happens is a lot of people believe that if you have a twin flame or you have a soulmate, then you're destined to be together. But what happens is these labels can sometimes romanticize unhealthy behavior and then keep you attached to a harmful person or a harmful partner, right? Even from afar, right? Even if you're not together anymore, you're still having these longing feelings, or, thinking about them constantly, and not being able to be present in your life. So we can reframe the perspectives on twin flames and soulmates. You can still believe in twin flames and soulmates. I'm not saying you don't need to believe anything. But what we do here is change it and reframe it to a perspective of personal growth, of personal love for you. And so maybe instead of believing like, this was my twin flame and we were meant to be, and now life is like distraught, right? Or this was my soulmate and we're going to be together someday again, and you're just constantly holding on to that. Isn't it possible that you can still be a soulmate, you can still have a twin flame, and that was the journey? Like the end is here. And that beyond the grave, when you die, when you go on to the next realm, heaven, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, that you fulfilled whatever it was that you were destined to fulfill on this planet. That you don't need to be with that person as a human being any more than what you already were, right? So it's just shifting the perspective a little bit, right? Because you can still believe that you are twin flames or that you were soulmates. But what about thinking of it in terms of maybe we already fulfilled the lessons that we were supposed to, and maybe this is where our journey ends? And is it possible that people could have more than one soulmate, or more than one twin flame, or more than one lesson in this world, right? So I just want you to start thinking about things in different ways. That's all that you're trying to do here, because that way you can change your perception about these labels to get back your power and your autonomy, because holding on to these things is what often keeps us feeling stuck. So just as a reminder, your subconscious mind believes whatever you tell it. So if you tell your subconscious mind, again, like you're trauma bonded, or this was your soulmate, or it was meant to be, your subconscious mind goes back into the storage bank of your memories and pulls out all the evidence of that for you because it wants to be right. And then even looking in your current situation, your current life, right, you will also be seeing more and more and more of those things that prove what you're telling your subconscious mind. It's sort of like if you've ever went to go buy a new car, you're like looking at new cars, and let's say you were going to buy a little red BMW and you really want to buy that particular car and you haven't bought it yet, but you're like looking through magazines or like looking online, and now all of a sudden you're out driving around and you see this red car all the time. You see it in a parking lot, you see it driving down the road, and that's because there is a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, and that part of your brain filters out all the things that aren't important. So because we're receiving billions and billions of bits of information every day, our brain can't handle all of that. It's like system overload. So it filters out all the things that aren't really important in that moment. So you could even be like right now listening to my voice, but filtering out other things, right? There might be a clock ticking, a dog barking, a train blaring its horn. Maybe you hear kids playing, maybe somebody's tapping on their keyboard or whatever. Like, you're filtering out these things because you're focused on what I'm saying. And it's the same thing with your reticular activating system working to help you focus on what's important. So that red car you're focusing on. And this happens also when we're talking about the subconscious mind and believing the things that we tell our brain that we are trauma bonded, or that we are meant to be, or whatever. So your brain is looking for proof and evidence of that to be right. So awareness is so key. Like, knowing that this is what's happening inside of your head is really important. But you might be asking, well, how do I do it? Like, how do I take action to shift this stuff? Right? And what I want to tell you is so important is putting it on paper, right? When I'm working with my clients one-on-one, I tell them, you have got to put this on paper. A lot of times they want to just run it through their head and do the thought processes that I teach them in their mind. And sometimes that's necessary, right? If we're driving down the road, you obviously can't write it down. But taking time, like carving out special time to write down your subconscious thoughts, to get this stuff on paper and out of your head, is so much more impactful than just trying to do it in your head. So when you're asking how, number one, get out a piece of paper. I mean, it's so simple. Literally, get out a piece of paper, get out a pen, and start writing down what you believe about the trauma bond, what you believe about the soulmate idea or this notion of twin flames. What do you believe about that? And put it all on paper. Write it down. Put a whole entire list of things. And you'll see what's going on in your subconscious mind. You will absolutely see it right there on paper. But then what we have to do is we have to start to challenge those ideas, right? We're not saying they're not true. Maybe they are true. But remember, a belief is just a thought that is not 100% true for 100% of people 100% of the time, right? So we might believe it. We might believe it or feel like we know it inside of us, but it's still a belief. So it's really important to get it on paper and start to actually look at it and say, well, what else could be possible? Is there something else here I haven't thought of? And this is where you get into that self-reflection, that self-awareness, and start really, really helping yourself to transform from this victim state to this like personal empowerment and personal growth. And it's happened to me. It's happened to lots and lots of my clients who take the time to actually put it on paper and start to question it. So let's just take a common example of how this trauma bond, this twin flame soulmate idea can have underlying subconscious beliefs. And we'll use one example that I've heard a lot, and then we'll kind of deconstruct that. And that would be, it wasn't supposed to be like this, right? Because if you have this idea about these trauma bonds or whatever, you may have lots and lots of subconscious beliefs about it, right? There's probably not just one. There's probably multiple ways that you say it, multiple different beliefs that are in your subconscious mind. So I'm just going to use one example, but more often than not, there's probably like 10, 20, 30 subconscious beliefs at least, and maybe even more on one particular neural pathway, on one particular topic that we're struggling with. So that's why you see it's very complex. So if we say it wasn't supposed to be this way, what if we consider that it maybe was supposed to be this way, right? Because if you put that down on paper, then you're seeing what your subconscious is telling you. It wasn't supposed to be this way. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Holding on to that belief is what's keeping you in pain, because it is this way. Because the reality is disagreeing with what you believe in your subconscious mind. These two things are at opposite ends of the spectrum. Reality is not the same as what you believe. So let's shift the belief, right? We're not saying you can't believe it. We're just saying we're going to shift it. So specifically, what makes you believe it wasn't supposed to be this way? And ask yourself that, right? Really get into how would you answer that? And what if it was supposed to be that way? What if it absolutely was something that changed you? Like for me personally, I had that same belief that it wasn't supposed to be this way. We were supposed to be together. We were supposed to live to be in our 80s or 90s and watch our grandkids and have this happy life. Like that's what my brain was telling me. And it wasn't supposed to be this way, right? But that belief was what was keeping me in so much pain. So what I had to do was shift this. Maybe it was supposed to be this way, because guess what? It is. And guess what? I wrote a book. And guess what? I'm out here helping you now. And I'm coaching other people. And I'm changing people's lives with this methodology. Because now other people are getting out of pain. So isn't it possible that it was supposed to be this way? That it worked out exactly how it was supposed to? That now I'm in a really loving relationship with someone who treats me wonderfully? That I can see my worth and value now? So all you're doing here is you're exploring other possibilities. And what happens when you do that is you weaken that old neural pathway that says it wasn't supposed to be this way, that's creating that awful feeling inside of you. And that's keeping you feeling stuck. And then you start to ponder and you start to pause and you start to think about all the other things that are possible. Maybe it was supposed to be that way. If you have a hard time letting go of this, if you're having resistance to it, right? Because for some people that comes up, that is completely normal, right? And what you want to do there is you want to get into, well, what benefit do I get from feeling this way? If I'm having a hard time letting go of this thought, why? Does it give me something? Does it, make me feel a certain type of way to hold on to it that makes me feel comfortable? Or is there a fear that comes up that if I don't believe this, then that means something else, right? So if there is resistance coming up, please know that that is totally normal. It just takes a little bit more inspection, a little bit more inquiry to understand, because your brain is trying to keep you safe. That's all it's trying to do. So if letting go of something like this is really hard, it's because your brain feels safe holding on. But a lot of times, because of how our nervous system works and because of our trauma and our experiences, it's not really keeping us safe to hold on to it. It's actually hurting us more, and it's preventing us from healing. All right, so if you are someone who really holds tight to these ideas of trauma bonds and twin flames and soulmates and any other things like it, meant to be, whatever, really want you to think about how these labels are either helping you or hurting you in your healing journey. Because like I said at the beginning, sometimes understanding something helps us a lot. It really does, because then we know what to do. But if you're making it mean something in your subconscious mind, that oftentimes can just stall your recovery. So I'd really encourage you to reflect on your own perceptions, the labels that you use when it comes to your recovery journey. Everyone's going to be different, and this may apply to you and may not apply to you. But being inside your own mind, getting into reflection of what you say, how you say it, the words you use, what it means, all of this stuff really can be super helpful to unlock these bonds that are keeping you feeling stuck and unable to heal or, move forward. So embracing your own self-empowerment, right? Letting that be the driver. Like, I want to be empowered. I want to, break free from this. That is so good for your healing, right? If you can shift even just that, right, to I want to be empowered, right? Because if not, then it's like this other person has you, they're just got this chain to you and they can just drag you wherever that they want to. But you've got to be the one to break that chain. They don't really have a chain on you, right? It's your belief that they have this chain to you or that you have this chain to them. So if you're struggling with this, with these trauma bond ideas or twin flames or soulmates, because I know a lot of people do, please know that you can break free from these labels and you can embrace your own journey to freedom of your thoughts, freedom of emotions, your just general well-being and peace inside of yourself. But it has to start inside of you. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. I hope it has been helpful to you. And anytime that you have any questions or suggestions for the podcast, please let me know. You can reach me on Instagram or Facebook. And I just want to remind you also that I don't know if you have seen, but I have a deconditioning workbook on my website. And you can get that for free. Just go out to my website, www.whentearsleavescars.com, and just scroll down and you'll see the free deconditioning workbook. And that gives you just a lot of insight, a lot of questions, and ways to start that kind of introspective look at yourself and the conditioning that's happened to you throughout your life. So that way you can start to make these changes and start to challenge these thoughts. So if you haven't gotten that yet, go on out to the website and get that. It's totally free, and then you can just start practicing this on your own. So I'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks for joining. Thank you for being here with me today in the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. I hope you found value here with me. If this podcast episode was helpful to you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave me a review. My goal is to help you go from feeling stuck to set free. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out whentearsleavescars.com for more resources and information to help you with your own emotional abuse recovery. Until next time, here's to believing in